One of mine is airships. Wanting to fly them, build them, be with them. There's nothing, to my mind, quite like messing about in airships. Moving like a cloud over the ground, moving in a craft like none other. Agreed then about the shape, then this makes it 72 feet long, 28 feet in diameter, and our car will be down at the bottom, about 12 feet long. The friends were, from left to right, Giles Camplin, Jasper Tomlinson, and Michael Price. Together we argued, planned, built, disagreed, went back to the drawing board, and ended stage one with a gondola, a masterpiece in our minds of economy, compromise and sheer brilliance. Where better to take it than to Cardington. And at Cardington in the old 101 hangar, we had our envelope, a thing best inspected from the inside. Light on, please. Yeah, it's about here. Can you see where my finger is?
Yes, you're about 3 foot below the mid-pad.
All right. Will you mark it?
I'll mark it from my side.
Okay, keep your finger there where it was. The smallest of holes shine like searchlights in the darkness.
Keep it there for a moment.
And as this cavern will contain the gas, even the smallest of holes have to be sealed.
Can you put your hand against it?
Yeah.
Okay, Jasper? Yeah? I think that's the end. We've got a nice airship.
The next and vital stage was to fill the hull with gas. The stuff panting in was hydrogen. Poor hydrogen. It's had a bad press over the years, for it does burn so very well. In fact, it's no worse than, say, petrol, and if treated carefully, is fairly safe. From the point of view of someone with airship disease, it's lighter than helium, far cheaper, and therefore preferable in its way. Anyway, we needed 30,000 cubic feet of something to get us airborne, and we chose hydrogen. With the gas inside, gravity gets turned upside down. Everything that used to be heavy is suddenly light. The whole device has to be restrained from going up to the roof. So fins and every other kind of weight are added at this stage. The more we worked, the more it looked like an airship. And the more it looked like an airship, the more and more were all our ideas checked as this or that did not fit, or was right after all.
How's that going to work when that drops down?
Yeah. Do you think these dog clips are going to be strong enough?
I think they'll yield at somewhere between 200 and 300 pounds. That's what we've found with the static.
So something else might be a bit better.
If we wanted to break somewhere else.
Yes.
At all times, tediously, the airship's ballast needs readjustment. Let up the ropes a bit, and up she goes a bit.
No.
The envelope itself, although full enough with gas, is a sad sack at this stage and won't look right until air is puffed into special airbags. But not yet. First, The envelope has to be allowed to rise to make room beneath it for the gondola. Nothing had been argued about quite as much as our gondola. And whatever other people said when they first saw it on the roof rack, we thought it was good. But the testing time for all our theories came when we wheeled it into place.
Is that far enough back?
Everything had to lead down to that gondola. The suspension wires, the control lines to elevator and rudder, the valve lines, the ripcord, the pressure gauges, the air inlet system. And in the gondola itself were the engines and their controls, the in-flight ballast, the air scoops, seating for 3, instruments, a trail rope, a grapnel, in fact all the paraphernalia needed to make the happy idea of an airship into a machine that actually works. Unlike a rigid structure where the designed length of something becomes the actual length, a pressure airship is more like a living thing, and it's impossible to say how long every chord should be until you get up there and try it out.
Come round with me.
Very well caught. No, not quite right. On the end of the loop. Given by a friend and taken from a Lotus was our elevator wheel. Backwards for up, forwards for down, and it felt very good. The lines, through all the fair leads, had just sufficient play.
Do you think those are good enough hooks to stay on? It's bent round a bit more, perhaps.
It's bent round a bit more, but... The rudders, both of them, were moved by a single control bar at the pilot's feet. Once again, the connecting cords had to be right. And once again, though the airship itself might still look a bit of a sack, we knew that things were slowly working out. With the gondola securely in place, all the weights still hanging from the envelope could be put inside it. They'd only be removed when it was time for people to get in. An airship has always got to have something holding it down. Anchor points, sandbags, iron weights, or just bodies. Otherwise, it goes up just as surely as everything else comes down. And then it was time to put in the air. There were 2 airbags or ballonets. All pressure airships need them so that a constant volume is maintained during flight by changing the amount of air within and never the amount of gas. The gas expands as you go up, and so you lose some air to compensate. Coming down, you do the opposite and put air back via the engines. Time for an engine test. Giles at the extinguisher, Mike at the ballast box, and Jasper at the controls. We had all worked unbelievably hard to reach this stage. Two 20-horse Wankels with 28-inch ducted fans. One 5-gallon petrol tank, enough for 2 hours of flight. One 12-volt battery. Ballast. Seating for 3, and that was all. To our eyes, everything looked well, sounded well, and augured well for our first flight. The one reliability about English weather is, as they say, it's unreliability. A calm day suddenly produces a stiff breeze just when we want it utter calm. So, back inside and yet another check on our hydrogen's purity. As with petrol, it's much safer when 100% pure, and so you check to find out how much air has seeped in through the fabric of the envelope. When purity falls to 90%, you throw the hydrogen away.
Well, I reckon it's 96 news, damn it.
The calm comes. The Met balloon and the windsock suddenly look right, and the anemometer also says that the hour has arrived for an airship once again to pass through those famous hangar doors. We seem to have the bounce and enthusiasm of a bunch of undertakers after a difficult week. In theory, we should have been relishing the triumphant conclusion of our labour. In practice, we were anxious, doubtful, nervous, frightened, for we knew so intimately how many things could go wrong. The R101 had just fitted into that hangar. We, by comparison, were minute. But nonetheless, we felt a twinge of sympathy with those men who, 46 years earlier, had let their enthusiasm for airships get the better of them. The evening still looked good. We checked everything and no wind came to send us back again. It was time to begin. Too heavy. It was as simple as that. An airship should take off slightly heavy so that it won't be too light to land when it's used up a lot of fuel. But of course, if it's too heavy, it won't get anywhere. So, out with some sand, and then it was time to try again.
All right, perhaps we better do that first. Okay,
After all, this was a first flight, a maiden voyage with a maiden who'd never done this sort of thing before.
Fantastic.
Good.
Oh, 27.
27. I thought you said 7.
Okay, well, let's prepare to take off.
Okay, stand by the table.
Let's see. I'm going to take off just flat.
is inexpressible. The first thought on getting up was how to get down safely. But having got down, the next thought was to do it all again, and this time with Mike on board.
Better? Okay. Is it still coming out of the front? It's getting better. Didn't seem to be making any change at all. I think what I'd like with the side people is they would let go of the rope and run.
Okay, I've told them to come in and let it go slack.
So we flew and flew, only to realize all the work still ahead of us.
So what are we actually going to say to the C.A.A. man? It's very difficult because...
For long weeks we thrashed out a quite new set of problems, how both to improve our airship and pass the test for the cherished certificate of airworthiness. Only when that was done could we inflate again, this time with helium.
Minimum.
Okay, Bob, let's have it. Think a bit faster.
It was nice seeing helium go in, and gas and equipment gave us that peace of mind never possible with hydrogen. There is a feeling of creation about inflating a pressure airship. One moment it's a heap of fabric lying on the ground, more like a collapsed tent than any flying machine. But gradually it comes alive, lifting itself off the floor, taking on the shape it's supposed to be, permitting ropes and cords to do their job. There was also the extra joy that whatever anybody did, the whole thing could never catch fire.
Something like that. I don't know when I see you tighten it up afterwards or slacken it off afterwards.
Helium was one new blessing, but there were countless others, modifications here and there, a changed shape, less weight, strengthening, lengthening, the results of our airborne experience. In particular, there was now a mooring point.
How does it feel, Jasper?
Pretty good.
Put both of you on it.
Right.
Okay, jump.
Well, we put it down.
Is that going to hold it in a strong wind?
Good enough, yeah?
Nothing's happening there.
Okay. Right. Snatch like... Yeah.
It should be £8 million better than the other arrangement. We put a ball and socket joint upside down on a lorry and now knew the airship couldn't blow away. We also knew we couldn't fall out. A piece of string around our waists had been crucial once, but there was now a sophisticated harness. There were improvements everywhere, things forgotten about in the understandable haste to get airborne. For example, someone had said, "What happens if it rains?" We knew what would happen. The engines would stop. So we waterproofed their controls. And we knew what happens if you vibrate a shackle long enough. It undoes itself. So we had to put in locking wire. How many more are there?
There are 5 more.
Well, that's all right then.
No British gas airship had been awarded a certificate of airworthiness for 46 years. There were no official regulations on the subject. So we just did everything we could to make our airship as safe and secure and sane as seemed reasonable. And we also gave ourselves a name. Who better than Santos Dumont, that Brazilian pioneer? And where better to first show ourselves in public than at an old Warden flying display at their Bedfordshire airfield just half a dozen miles from Cardington. We felt ourselves at that place to be in the right kind of vintage company. So they put us on the list of events, and we waited for our turn, as at the Palladium, while others went through their paces. A Bristol fighter, 60 years old, but not yet retired. Take off after the Spitfire, they had said. And although we didn't know about everything that flew that day, we felt we would know a Spitfire when we saw one. D-Day colouring on the Spitfire Mark 9 and our cue to move into position. Everybody else had done so well that the thought of cancellation didn't enter our heads. But we had never before flown in the turbulent middle of the day. It was all very well for the 1,520 horsepower of the Spitfire, but as far as we were concerned, we detached ourselves from our anchor point in conditions windier than we had ever known before. We should have said, "Let's fly later," but we didn't.
Up, get
starship engines were roaring, but the airfield just got further and further away. It was even windier up there, far windier, and so was I. Whatever I did, I ended up further downwind. So I tried getting lower, and then all of a sudden I was very much lower. I realized I'd put too much air into the front ballonnet and was therefore firmly nose down, towards one farm in particular, with big sheds, electricity, tall trees. In fact, trees began to dominate. I wanted a place to land in without any of them, something, in short, like an airfield, and certainly not where I eventually arrived. Brussels sprouts and terra firma. On the way there, I'd picked up some oak tree and a considerable quantity of sprout, but neither I nor the cameraman was injured, and the loneliness of our accident very quickly became a crowd. The trouble is, you can't get out of an airship whatever's happened. So you sit there, take stock, wonder what on earth did happen, and watch as the others prune the Santos Dumont of her in-flight mementos. You're also a prisoner for anyone with questions, and you try to answer them with an appropriate turn of phrase. The farmer couldn't have been nicer about his sprouts, and he pointed out a route for us back to the airfield. The damage seemed to be slight enough, but we thought it wise to go back overland, just in case. I, fresh from the clouds, was particularly enthusiastic at this idea. It also meant, as they pulled and opened gates and so on, that I could continue to sit there, pondering on the day and counting the errors that came to mind. We had lost face, no doubt about that, but at least we hadn't lost the ship. In the morning, everybody else was enthusiastic over the idea that I should fly her back to Cardington for a more thorough overhaul. So, in the calm of 6 a.m., with only our engines blowing the grass, we prepared again for takeoff. There is a belief in aviation that after any mishap, you should get airborne again without delay. It restores the nerves, so they say.
Up, ship!
And they are right. Up there in that curious heaven of being above the ground, I felt reborn. The patchwork of country was as beautiful as ever. The birds flew along with me and then settled to write music on the wires. I was content again. Cardington loomed almost at once, and this time I would land her properly. the lorry still at Old Warden, we hooked her to a car and then motored to the hangar to see what trees and sprouts had done. It is good to fly. It's also good to feel the ground again. And best of all, to know that the Santos Dumont was still sound. Nothing had gone wrong on the flight back, but a check was advisable and she was returned to that comforting, secure vastness of a hangar, where such inspection was so infinitely easier than in an open field. Giles and Jasper did the work. I, after flying to Old Warden, waiting, flying and crashing, getting back to the airfield, staying up all night in case a wind got up, and then flying back to Cardington, was feeling gently drowsy and happily idle. So they took out the elevator control extension arm that I had slammed into a tree, and they straightened it, and they put it back again. That, as far as we could see, was all that had to be done. Then, as the wind was still calm and as Old Warden was having yet another flying day, it seemed right at the time to fly back there again. Jasper and I agreed that he should try this time. The rest of us had rushed round to Old Warden. At first all seemed well with Jasper, but then the thermals started taking hold of him. It was the hottest time of day and they were twisting him about. Plainly, he wasn't having an easy time and there were plenty of things not to hit. People, cars, airplanes. But he seemed to be heading okay for the open field. And then we saw, and he saw at the same time, that the wind was sending him straight for a couple more parked aircraft on the other side. So, at all costs, he had to miss them. And he did so, but in doing so, rammed the poor Santos Dumont straight into a belt of trees. A branch broke, it punctured the envelope, and that was that. What a mess. A pressure airship with one hole and pressure no more. More like undertakers than ever, we surveyed the wreckage and tried to absorb what had happened to our splendid flying machine and the dreams that went with it. It bore as much comparison now to the original as a dead souffle. But believe it or not, the ship was flying again 1 week later. We were loaned more gas. We found our energy and we got that precious certificate of airworthiness, the first for 46 years. It hadn't seemed possible on the day of the crash, but airships are resilient, and so are people, and from this mess we flew again. The Santos Dumont, therefore, is still alive and well, and so are we. And we still have this problem of liking airships, come what may.